today our guest is producer, arranger, songwriter, keyboardist, and drummer, Mr. Robert Sput Searight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. That was a lot.
That was a lot.
Am I all that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You know, I would say that I could listen to you play drums all day, you know, truthfully. And the reason being is when I listen to you play drums, I feel like I'm not listening to just a drummer. It's like a musical experience. It's a lot of musicality. You're catching different accents that the guitar player is doing, the keys player is doing, setting different parts up. It's like a musical experience. Where does that musicality come from?
At first it starts with the love of music. I mean, and then I guess the upbringing, my background, you know, gospel music, just going and growing up with music a part of my entire life, no matter what I wanted to do. My whole family was musically inclined, so I had no choice. So it's been in my DNA. So I think that's where it comes from, you know, just, you know, being aware, you know, even though I gravitated towards the drums, I had a piano in the house, we had an organ in the house, so we had other instruments in the house. It was a saxophone in the house. I don't know where that saxophone came from or where it went, but there was just instruments in the house, drums and percussive stuff. It wasn't a complete drum set. When I was a kid, I was beating on pots and pans, but so I gravitated towards the drums, but I had other instruments, so I kind of I taught myself how to play just by not walking past those instruments and just sitting down and trying things out. So I think that's where it comes from, but because I don't approach drums from a rhythmic standpoint. It's always been from a melodic standpoint, and even before I knew that's what it was. That was my approach, even before I knew anything about theory and all those things. I just could hear it differently. Yeah.
The music was just always around.
Yeah. I mean, like as long as I can remember, like I was singing on pitch, harmonies and duets with my mom and my aunties and my sisters. You know, as long as I can remember, it was a part. You know, it wasn't just drums. It was like all sorts of stuff, from singing to other instruments as well.
Was there ever like any formal training, like any private lessons coming up, or was everything just like, you know, picked up in the church?
I think it's all raw.
Yeah.
I think until I got to junior high school. I got to junior high school and I thought I was gonna be a scientist because I was winning all the science contests, and I wanted to be a scientist. So I went to a school called Thomas Edison Junior High School, and for the 7th grade and the 8th grade, my mom was like, "Nah, you're gonna go to this music school." And there's a guy that they went to school with in college. His name was Dean Hill, and she was like, and he was the teacher for Roy Hargrove and Keith Anderson, and he was like, my mom was like, "You're gonna go hang out with him for a while," and I learned the fundamental structure of theory and basic music theory and functional piano. And I just learned how to read, and I learned what rudiments was and all that kind of stuff. So I started getting the other side when I was in the 8th grade.
That's pretty interesting, because normally parents stray their kids away from like a musical profession.
No.
But your mom said no more science, just
go
to music.
I had no choice. But it was the right decision.
Well, now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was kind of upset about it at first because, I was 7th grade going to 8th. I had, discovered girls.
Come on.
I had my first girlfriend. I had my eye on my first girlfriend, but I didn't get to have my first girlfriend there because I ended up going to the music school, which ended up changing my life, honestly. It gave me a good sense of a direction of what I really want to do in life and the purpose I want, and what my purpose was. And yeah, that's where it was all developed.
And you mentioned in one of our earlier conversations that you hear frequencies when you're playing in drums, whether it's like the low ends with the kick and the toms, or mids, or like high mids and then the highs. It's like in some way the whole scientist
It's still
aspect
there.
of it never left.
Yeah, it's still there. Well, but that's solely because I'm a producer and I sit with engineers mixing records and stuff like that, and I have an engineer that he spends hours carving out frequencies. So now I know frequencies. Like and so now everything I do, I see it in that. I see, I kind of relate it to frequencies. Like, and it's kind of mad. It's kind of mad scientist kind of stuff, for me, and it's kind of annoying sometimes because I can't get away from it. But that's just how I see it now. I see colors and frequencies, and that's how I kind of construct all of the things that I do musically.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like conceptually you understand music like a scientist, but when you play it, it feels good. You know how you can hear someone overthinking? You know what I mean? But for you, it's like, all the subdivisions. You know that this hit is on the E of 2 or whatever it is. You see the frequencies, or you hear the frequencies. You see the colors. You know what all the instruments are playing, but still you sound good. You don't sound like you're overthinking.
I hope so. That's that. I mean, that's the goal. I have and I have a mental, like, if you will, like a mental sound booth that has all the things that I've internalized and given myself in terms of information, and I always go to that. And I mean, those things are there, they're exercised, and they're just there waiting to be used. So it's like pulling things out the air and just using them because they're accessible. So all these things are accessible, and I kind of just draw from them, and that's what you get, because I don't think about music. I think music. I'm very free to let the music dictate what comes for me, and so far it's been cool. I mean, I'm sure there's times where it didn't work out, but it's not enough to remember.
You mentioned that you have a lot of musical influences, one of them being Joe Smith.
Right.
Talk to me a bit about...
biggest.
What was that?
He's the biggest.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So in what ways was he able to influence you and shape your sound, or just shape your approach to music?
Well, first of all, music of the 70s. I'm a 70s baby, and I just remember being moved by a drummer first, listening to him, and I would say the way he played, but not just the way he played. His attention to sound, and the sound that he chose to put on these records. And I don't know if it was intentional or if it was just what he had, but it just whatever he was doing kind of shifted, my whole situation, and I was fascinated with him when I was 5 years old, and everything kind of just like spiraled from there, like trickled down to, like, I compared everybody I met or everybody I heard from that point to him, and tried to compare I try to figure out the relationship between what they were doing, and even though it was different genres of music, when I was a kid, all I can listen to was gospel until my auntie divorced her husband, who was a DJ, and left all the crates at my mom's house. So, and then I was exposed to all this other music. So, I mean, those are the reasons why that was the only reason why I was able to compare that. But before that, he was all I was listening to. It was all I recognized. I was listening to, Andre Couch Records, which had Bill Maxwell, who was also a producer, drummer, that produced. So I was always reading credits and reading that this drummer was the producer. So that was fascinating too. Like, that was another influence of mine. And I think that what caught me, his drumming wasn't flashy.
Right.
but the fact that he was a drummer that produced, and I understood what production was at that age, and that was inspiring too. But Joel was just like, he was the standard for me.
What made you choose drums? Because I know coming up in your family, there was different instruments that you played, but then, and even now, you still play keys, but you kind of focused on drums. Was it a specific thing about the drums that just pulled you towards that?
I know it's a cliche, man, but I think, I don't know if I chose drums. I think my mom always told me that anytime a beat come around, I was kicking her stomach and getting excited up in there. And I mean, like, you know how parents, you know how mothers, they always tell these stories. Oh, you were in my stomach, you used to kick on beat. Yeah, right. Come on, Mom. You know, but I used to hear those stories. Like, I heard stories like that, you know, and how people would put their hand on the belly and they would hear me pulsing and stuff like that. And I'm like, really? So as soon as I came out, I was kicking and trying to pick up things in my hand and beat things, they say, and go to my grandma's house and pull out the pots and create a drum kit. So I think it's just always been there, even before I knew it. I got my first drum kit when I was 5. So from 0 to 5, I was terrorizing everybody, you know, beating on stuff. So I think it was always there. And when I actually visually saw drummers, it just heightened the whole curiosity, I think. And it was such a natural thing. It was, you know, I could play drums before I could play anything else either, you know, as well. So I think that's, you know, that was just what I was supposed to do.
One thing that sticks out to me is typically musicians who grow up in a certain genre oftentimes get branded in that genre. You know, like if you grew up in the church, you grew up on just playing gospel music and you kind of get stuck to that genre, or when you go to play a different genre, you can still hear that this person has a gospel background because they're not, you know, playing the essence of that genre. How did you manage to go from genre to genre, whether it's hip hop, fusion, or you know, music with Snarky Puppy, and then Ghost Note, and then just like different genres of music, but still respecting the essence of that genre?
Yeah, I think when I got to high school, I had to study genres of music. And I think when I studied genres of music, the first thing I would do was find the correlation between each genre. Like, and one of the things I discovered that was actually cool was how everything was kind of influenced by gospel music. Like every genre, like blues sounded like quartet to me. Country sounded like Jubilee music, which was like the early gospel music, you know, and R&B sounded like gospel. Jazz sounded like gospel music to me. I found some elements of every genre relating to the music I grew up on. And but in finding those elements that were relatable, I also found what made them distinctively different by studying all of the genres. And studying, you know, all these different genres, then you find out the culture of these genres, like where they come from, and then that's when you really get deep into the respect of each genre, each style of music. Certain things you can't do if you've really studied the language of the styles of music especially from a drummer's perspective, because you can play a perspective of a Latin groove and it be disrespectful, you know, and I mean, and knowing that and being respectful of that, you know, is important. And I've always prided myself in, hey, look, there's church swing and there's swing. There's no such thing as church bebop. But if you know, you know, and there's Prince swing, and just knowing the difference, you know, and being able to apply that in the settings that you're in makes a difference. as well. And I mean, and that just take that and duplicate it through all your studies, like from style to style, genre to genre. And I wanted to be able to function in any environment that was presented to me. And I had to give credit to my school, my alma mater. They really instilled in us to pay close attention to the difference that each genre gave you. I mean, the difference that each genre presented, you know, in terms of what made the genre, the style that you're studying. And they gave us that. They would give us examples of not just the artists, but the musicians. The musicians, the people that kind of created those styles. Like when we learned about go-go music, we heard Chuck Brown's name because he was the first artist, but we also heard like all of the old school guys, like the bongo, the guy, the percussionist, and Buggy, the drummer. So it was just like, it's a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of people that we could relate to the genres and stuff like that. Tony Allen for Afrobeat, you know, not just James Brown, but his musicians, Maceo Parker, Bootsy Collins, you know, and all of these things, you know, these make a difference. You know, for jazz, for me, Max Roach, you know, he was an orchestrator on the drums. Also, Art Blakely, who was a band leader. There's, you know, just a full plethora of you know, examples of how to separate, you know, each individual style, and that's what I pride myself in doing. So I think it rendered me success, you know, having that as a end all be all. Look, I got to learn this. I can't play this. You know, if I'm going to incorporate this in this, and also growing up in church, you can't really play styles outside of church music authentically. You know, so I've always been a rebel.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, growing up in a strict church environment, you couldn't just play funk.
Got you.
You know what I mean? You could play things that sound funky, but if it got too funky, you know, it was the devil's music at that point, you know. And I mean, it's a little different now. I think some churches have liberated past that, but I think when I was coming up, that was important, and that was something that taught me a lot about the difference, you know, and respecting that.
Yeah.
You know, and that goes for every genre, you know. You playing country music, you gotta own a pair of brushes. You playing jazz, bebop, you gotta own a pair of brushes, and you gotta know how to use them. You know, and it's not, you have to know how to paint, and that's a big difference. Using the same items, you know, there's a big difference in the two, and you just have to know the difference. You only know that if you study.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a language. It's a language. Jazz is a language in playing jazz music. It's a language in playing gospel music. There's a hump that comes with playing gospel music. If you don't know that hump, you're kind of gonna be out. You're gonna be a fish out of sea. You know, like everybody's looking for you to do that. You know, because it's a part of the style. It's part of the, you know, it's the way to play that. You know, so.
I think there's a huge learning curve with like really understanding the different genres, really getting the essence of it. You think listening to records is the best way, or finding musicians who play those genres and going to jam sessions or gigs, or even traveling to different countries? Where, you know, what's the best way, or what were the ways that you got those genres within you? Then also, what are some ways for musicians now, because it's somewhat of a different culture, to get that same knowledge?
I think it's all of the above. I think I couldn't travel, but I know one thing. When I was able to go to Africa, because I studied folkloric drumming, and Afrobeat music or Nigerian music or African music, if you will. But when I went to Africa and saw the culture, it's totally different. And there's nothing that can teach you that
How's it different?
unless you are there to experience it. Because it's, I mean, when we hear music, we see it as music. We see it as music, but there is a way of life. It's spiritual. And I mean, there's intent from everything, you know. The people are not just dancing because drums are going. Like these are this is what we would call the equivalent to prayer for us, or celebration. You know, I mean, for me over here, July 4th in America is a celebration, and we see firecrackers. You know what I'm saying? And someone turns on music and everybody grabs a drink and start dancing. Hey, you know. But it's the same thing, but it's it's a different culture. So, and I think that's one thing that I learned. And that, I mean, because learning a pattern and being like, yeah, I got this pattern. Okay, I'm good. I got it. But when you go over there and you understand what that pattern means, and you understand that it was a language, literally, to communicate with one another, yeah, it just kind of opens up a whole nother world for you. And yeah, it's like that in Cuba, you know, it's like that in Brazil. It's like that, and, you know, Latin music as well. You know, I mean, in some other Latin areas, it's India as well. You know, there's all of these different cultures, and what the same clave means something totally different in each culture. You know, and I think that's part of it. I think that's the part where you go to the culture, you have to experience the culture to really dive into it. The other part is listening to records, listening to the guys, seeing them play in person, and then studying them as well. But I think I would say it's all of it, all of the above, like trying to do all of it. Try to get away from, I mean, I would say try to get away from YouTube as much as possible, because it's a crutch, you know, sometimes, and it can kind of make you lazy in your studies, and make you lazy because you can pick and choose, and you can kind of skip over like some of the fundamentals and some of the essential things that you need, but you can't skip over something that's right in your face, and you know it's right there, and then you have no choice but to absorb it if you're being exposed to it. You know.
Well, as an arranger, you've been able to arrange for different artists, different bands, different groups. One of the ones that I'm very much familiar with is Snarky Puppy, who I think you won a Grammy with, right?
A few of them. Yeah.
A few of them. Well, how did you guys meet? How did you guys start working together?
Dallas area. At the time, I was playing with Erica. I was kind of in between doing production on the West Coast with artists like Snoop Dogg, and working with Timberland and Justin Timberlake and artists like that. And I came back home to where I was from, you know, and commuting back and forth. But I started playing and going out on the road with Erykah Badu, and we had a band. And outside of that, which was created with her, but we would do these jam sessions on Wednesday nights in the downtown Dallas area, right outside of downtown, called Deep Ellum. And basically, these guys from North Texas would come down, these little kids, and come down, and you know, they would be sitting in with us. And one day, this bass player came in, and he was a little puny guy. You know, he didn't look like he could really play, but I mean, like what he looked like and what he sounded like was such a shock. It was the shock value. And it was like, bro, where you come from? And he's like all humble, and his Mike Lee. He's like, oh man, yeah man, I have a band. I was wondering if you can come check us out, you know. And come to find out, they've been coming to see us play. They knew all about us. They've been studying. And that's what I'm saying, like paying attention to your surroundings and not just going places, looking things up. And they went to school. None of them were from Dallas. When they went to school and they studied the area that they were going to school in, and they came upon us, and by the time they found us, they knew our whole resumes and you know, they knew who we were. And you know, Mike invited me to come hear them play at a venue, and I went to go hear them play, and the rest is history. I was blown away.
Wow.
I never heard anything like that. And he asked me to come play with the band. I was like, anything you guys need, he asked me to come play with the band. I thought he was gonna ask me to play drums, but he asked me to play keys. So I was actually the keyboard player for the first year I was with the band. And then
Who's on drums?
a guy by the name of Steve Pruitt.
Okay.
And then he left the band, and Mike was like, can you play drums? And I was like, sure. And the rest is history after that, you know, because the sound of I feel like the sound of the band changed as with me as a drummer. But it's probably because of all the things we've talked about the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, is my approach to music, and I was also a producer in the band. A couple of records I produced, co-produced with Mike, Bring Us to Bright, Tell Your Friends, and maybe a little bit of the Ground Up record, but at least those two records, I had a big hand in some of the production, and I mean, like, even to this day, those relationships that were formed are still present, and I now have a band with the percussion player.
Right, Nate.
So yeah.
What gave you guys the idea to start that band, Ghost Note?
Well, you know, just like the camaraderie of the way we played together. Number one, we found a way to play as one, as a percussionist and a drummer.
Which is difficult.
And yeah, and Mike would ask me to take a solo, and from night to night, I'd be like, come on, jump in there with me. And Nate was like, we started playing in a way where we could finish each other's sentences, and it was kind of hilarious at first, you know. It was kind of, yeah, it was funny. But then we was like, whoa, like, hey man, we gotta stop knocking on wood, you know. Like this is becoming a common thing, you know. And one fan came up to us after a drum solo that we took together, and was like, yeah man, what song was you playing? And I was like, yeah, it's coming out on our next record. And I was just joking, and then we had a conversation about it. I was like, yo, we should actually do it. We should actually record a record. And so it turned into us going in and just making a beat record, and we cloned ourselves. We actually did it at the same studio where we cut, and in Dallas, and we actually came up with a record. We cloned ourselves, overdubbed, and came out with a project, and people asked us to tour it. And I was like, uh-oh. And so we had to start a band, because there's no way to tour it with just the two of us. So 4 years later, well, now we have a whole complete band, and it's been a journey.
Yeah.
It's been a really cool journey. Yeah.
What's it like playing that kind of music? Ghost Note, Snarky Puppy. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot going on musically, but it still feels really good. There's still a melodic approach to the music. It's not just like odd meters. It's not just hits. It's not just lines. There's still like a theme. There's still a motif that's being followed, but it's not like gospel. You know, it's not like, or I mean, it has gospel influence in it, and it has funk influences, but it's still its own kind of thing. Right. So what's it like just playing that style of music as opposed to everything else?
Oh, it's fun. It's free. Well, it's not that free, but I mean, it's fun to play. Yeah. It's organized freedom. Yeah, if you will. It's like, this is the best phrase I can use. This is organized freedom. It's freedom, but it's organized. It's structured, and it's still the same format. You learn the song, you learn the composition, and once you learn it, you're free to elaborate or embellish what you've learned. And if you got 7 to 8 people doing this on their in their role, and embellishing their parts, then it's gonna turn into something. And if 7 people are being aware of what's going on stage at the same time, being aware of space, being aware of simplicity, the art of simplicity, and dynamic levels, and using your ears.
You got to be a pretty high IQ level musician and one thing that I noticed about you is that you're pretty particular about who's in your band based on personality, skill set, how they approach their instrument. What's your thought process or your overall approach to choosing band members for different things?
Well, now in my older age, it's developed. It's helping develop younger guys. It's a mentorship for me now. But I think before now, I mean, I think everybody should be conscious of who they want to play with in a band setting. You if you want to have, it depends. If you want to be successful, then you have to consider who you have on the bandstand, because music is about. I mean, the delivery of music is about relationship. It's about how you feel about one another. We can't make music together and give off the spirit of what we're trying to present if we don't have a relationship. We can have fun doing that on a one night basis at a jam session or something, but we can't, heal people through music if we don't have healing from one another. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's very important. And when you hear music that is epic, and when you hear music that is very soothing and healing, and you can feel it, and you hear it through the energy, I think you're essentially hearing the relationship of the people that are giving it to you.
Yeah.
And that's important. And we're a family. The people that I make music with, they can call me outside of the music. They're gonna be the first ones there. If I have any sorrow, if I have anything that happens to me personally, they're gonna be the ones that's there first. They're gonna have my back if I get into some kind of trouble. They're gonna hold me accountable, and vice versa. For whatever, it's life. We're living. If we're on the road together, we live together, we grow together, and we eat together. We do all these things together, so we know things about each other that some of our closest friends don't. And this is what comes out in the music.
You do have this kind of like mentor, big brother approach, whether it's like you're mentioning Daniel Jones, my friend Sean Wright.
Yeah.
So what made you want to mentor? Or I guess a better question is, where does that come from? The need to, I don't know if it's need, but like just the desire to mentor people.
I think it's natural. It just naturally happened. I mean, these guys grew up listening to me. Like Sean, I was a fan watching him, on the Berkeley sessions, shared sessions and stuff. I was like, that guy, different approach. He plays musicality, so we kind of can relate to each other. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a music thing. And when we met, he told me he followed me and seen me play on all sorts of records and stuff like that, and was a big fan. And so I kind of when these guys meet me and they ask me questions, I think it's mostly because I'm older. But when they ask me questions, I end up just giving them my experiences, and that's how mentorship starts there, and then it just continues on. And I think respect. Every now and then you run across a young guy that actually respects the older guys in the game, and they actually won't allow it to be any other way. And so that's kind of how I earned a lot of the mentorship, the mentee situations that I'm in. But you know, after a while, then you start, if you see a space where you can help people, then you just do it.
Yeah.
You know, you try, or at least you make an effort.
My last question for you. If you could go back in time and change one thing about whether it's like your musical career, do something over, what would it be?
Oh man, there might be a few things. We're talking music related, right?
Anything. Music, life.
I think if I could do, I'll say two. The first thing would be that I would have started earlier, getting serious about studying music, and I would have started earlier. Yeah, I just would have started earlier, waiting to 8th grade to understand or try to bridge the gap between just knowing how to do something from rawness to the fundamentals and learning how to read and incorporate theory and, you know, the technical side of things to what I was doing. That was a hard curve for me. And it was only a hard curve because that was during the years where I started developing in different ways, and my mental capacity was changing. You know, when you're younger, you can learn at a rapid pace. You can learn things really fast. And if I started earlier, it would have been a faster ramp up for me, and I wouldn't have had to go through that curve. The second thing is probably projects. You know, like there's a project, and if I could do it over, I would have tried to just taken the reins, and that was the Kimberell Live, which I'm probably trying to do again. The Kimberell Live in Memphis, and it's just everything about that session was right except the actual performance. The rehearsals, the camaraderie, the personnel, everybody. It was perfect. But if I had a label then, or if I could give advice to a label, I would have advised a different way to present that to the public. And that's probably it.
And by that, you mean like the actual recording or
Yeah, the recording was,
the mix and stuff like that?
well, the mix is like a result of what happened that day. We had to be professionals as a musician. As a musician, sometimes you are called on to be the professional that you say you are. And in a session as a drummer that solely depend on a drum machine being the we had a drum machine on every song. It was so it was the palette, you know, and we had monitors, and I couldn't hear the drum machine the whole entire session. So my way of keeping time was given to me by the music director, who decided to move his body in ways because we weren't close. The setup was totally different. We had nothing to do with how it was set up. We were spread it across the stage, and he had to move his body in a way that seemed like he was having way too much fun, just so that I could feel the pulse of what I couldn't hear.
That's tough.
And it was just a lot of things about the way that was set up that was inconducive to a perfect delivery, or a decent delivery at least. And we had to just use our professionalism to get through that day. And it's revered as one of the greatest records in gospel music, and one of the most one of the transcending records, trendsetting records of our culture. You know, it shifted the culture. It was the first time 2 drummers played on a gospel record. Me and Calvin Rogers played drums on it, and it was the first time funk was allowed to be very present.
Yeah.
You know, and I think if we could do it over, we could do it in a better way. We might do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll be looking out for that.
Yeah.
Sput, thank you for sharing all the wisdom and stopping by.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.